This poem is called Poem for Sunday. In God's peace, breath is pure light. Always I move with all I am. Sense of no sense is not needed. Stories in pain allow light's brilliance. Veils are past where love is. Thank you.
Beautiful, thank you. And that's a poem for Sunday. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, and I want to thank Yasko for the lesson 286, which I'm going to also read a little from, and I'm going to speak a little about why the lesson, speak why the lessons are so important to do.
Just sit down, you don't need it.
Okay. The lessons which bring us into a very deep place within us. Like when I first started doing the course, I thought, well, I'll do the lesson 5 minutes in the morning and 5 minutes in the afternoon, 5 minutes in the evening, and that's doing the lessons. But actually, when you do the lessons, it brings you out of your external mind, the mind that's always looking outside, and it brings you deep within. And the goal of this course is peace. The goal of the course is not knowledge or understanding. You know, most people, if you read a book, you want to understand the book. But that's what the ego wants to do. The ego wants to understand things. Actually, the goal of the course is to empty your mind of everything. And today's lesson does exactly that. I found that during the day, when I used to go to business, I used to have problems and upsets, and I used to be angry, or I went into depression or something. Instead of staying there, I would do my lesson instead. It's like, I could have had a V8 instead. So the idea of doing your lesson is to bring you to a place of peace. That's the purpose of the lessons, is the experience of the course. As he says, you don't have to believe these lessons. You don't have to accept them. Just apply them. Just do the lesson. So I am going to do the first part of the lesson and the prayer part of the lesson exactly as he gives it. I ask everyone just to close your eyes, and we say, Father, how still today, how quietly do all things fall into place. This is the day that has been chosen in time in which I come to understand the lesson that there is no need that I do anything. There's no need for me to do anything. In you was every choice already made. In you has every conflict already been resolved. In you is everything I hope to find already given to me. Your peace is mine. My heart is quiet. My mind at rest. Your love is heaven, and your love is mine. And what is heaven but an awareness of our perfect oneness? That we are of one mind, of one heart, of one love, of one peace. Peace without opposite, peace without conflict. Eternal peace that I can experience in every moment of now, and now, and now. In truth, there's nothing but this peace of God that passes all understanding. There's nothing I need to know. I will be given everything. Yes? God is the strength in which I trust. There is nothing to fear, nothing. But trust has to be total trust. To trust completely is to remember the truth of what you are, that I am God's Son. I am the Holy One that God created as His Son. I am the Christ. The way I know this is I see the face of Christ upon all that I meet. Who was Jesus but a man who saw the face of Christ in all that he met, and he remembered the love of God, that God creates equally, that love is unconditional, that all are given the same. It's this sameness, this oneness, this equality, that's the one condition necessary for the peace of God. And for all of this, we are grateful that we are what we are looking for. It's not outside of us, it is us. Yes, the kingdom is not at hand. The kingdom is not even within. We are the kingdom of God, connected and joined together, always as one. I choose the joy of one, the connection of one, instead of the pain of separation, the pain of loneliness. And for all of this, we say, Amen. And this time around, remember to laugh. Yeah, last time we took it seriously. My teacher was Jesus in the Course in Miracles and Ken Wapnick. Met many brothers along the way who helped get me here. John Mundy is one of them. As John says, I met John before I found the Course in Miracles. I met John around 1976. I didn't find the Course until 77. I didn't know that John was doing the Course already. And I told him about S, and he did S, which is the one thing that I did do that helped me get to be where I am now, which is basically at S, I realized that the voice that speaks to me in my head is not my friend. It will always tell me what it is that I think I need or got to do in order to be better, to have more, to be special. And that was the voice of control, where I was always at the effect of something that was running me, but not what I am. So I did S, and later I met John, told John to do S, and at John's 1980, his New Year's Eve party in 1980, 1 minute after midnight, after John rang the bell and said, let's party, Giselle Lasbrow, who sometimes comes here, she lives down in Greenwich Village, she said, why don't we have a Course in Miracles meeting at my house? And David, why don't you lead it? And I can remember what happened in my mind. My mind says, you can't do that. You haven't finished the lessons. You've never opened the textbook. How could you lead a group? That was the ego speaking to me. But because I had this S training before, out of my mouth came, okay, I'll do it. And on the very first Monday in 1980 at Giselle Lasbrow's house, down in the corner of LaGuardia and Houston, 505 LaGuardia Place, we had a meeting. It was probably about 8-10 people that Giselle had her friends come. And John Mundy came. And he was there to help me get the meeting going, because I remember I was going through the course, through the textbook, and we were going to start on page 1 of the textbook, and I saw the page 1 was the 50 principles of A Course in Miracles, and I said, oh my God, I don't even understand any of these things. That there's no order of difficulty in miracles, all expressions of love are maximal. And I said, why don't we start on chapter 1, section 1? At least I understand the reading there. So John said, no. He says, let's do the 50 miracle principles. And that night I learned of the 50 miracle principles, the only one that we are responsible for, the only one, is number 7. And number 7 simply says, miracles are everyone's right, but purification is necessary first. Yeah, we are responsible for removing all the misinformation, mistaken beliefs, things that upset us, judgments that we have made. That is really the work that we are given to do when we take A Course in Miracles. It says, this is a required course. Only the time that you take it is voluntary. Now that seems to be, I'll do it whenever I want. I'll do it whenever I can. Some people buy the book and put it on a bookshelf and do it whenever they can. I remember going through the textbook the first time, and it said, a miracle can save you 1,000 years of time. 1,000 years of time. At that time, I realized, my God, this is not a book to read and understand. But what's a miracle? He said, miracles are everyone's right, but purifying your mind is your responsibility. You have to let go of all your beliefs, all your thoughts. None of them really mean anything. And where do we find that? That nothing here means anything. Does anyone know? In lesson 1. In lesson number 1, which after doing the course many years, I feel that lesson 1 is really the entire course. He's saying to you, nothing I see here means anything. You look around the room, and at first you think what you're doing is you're doing what the lesson is saying. You pick something out. This book, which came through me, doesn't really mean anything. This book, Course in Miracles, doesn't really mean anything. I mean, I remember the first time I went through this, I said, what do you mean this book doesn't mean anything? What do you mean it doesn't mean anything? He said, well, just in case you think anything here means anything, like this book means something, or your hand means something, or your hair or your body means something, just go on to lesson number 2. And it gives you the answer in lesson number 2. So I say between lesson 1 and lesson 2, that's the entire course. Because lesson 2 is very simple. It says, okay, if you think anything here means something, just remember, you're the one that gave it all the meaning it has for you. This book may have no meaning for anybody else, but it has meaning for me. I gave it the meaning, because my name is on it. I give it meaning. Like when I look at my dog Happy, I give my dog Happy a lot of meaning because he's my dog. To other people, he's just a dog. Other people's dogs, that's their dog. But my dog Happy, he has a lot of meaning. But remember, I'm the one that's given all the meaning to it. I'm the one that's investing in it and giving value to something in this world of time, things that begin in time, end in time. You're born, you live, you die. Oh, there's the word die. The Course says there is no death. So things that are temporary, things that are of this world, whether it's a book, a body, a dog, a family member, they come, they cross the stage of life, and they exit stage left. And yes, we value these things, but my birthday lesson, no one ever asked me what my birthday lesson was. My birthday lesson is I have 2 birthday lessons as it happened. I have one because I was born on a leap year, so I take that as my birthday lesson. So my leap year birthday lesson is lesson 133, which says, I will not value what's valueless. What's valuable belongs to me. And then it gives you 2 criteria to tell you exactly what has no value at all. And once you look at those 2 criteria, you realize that what he says, what has value belongs to me, is true. The first criteria is, if you're valuing something that begins in time, a book begins in time. Your body begins in time. Your family members begin in time. You might say, well, I really value my family members. It's okay to value them. Just remember, you're the one who's giving all the value to it. So if you value something that has temporary value, something that begins in time and ends in time, you're really believing in death, because the end of time, as we call it, is death. Body born, it lives, it dies. So we're valuing something that dies. He says that has no value. If it's not eternal, if it's in time, it has no value. If it's eternal, it's changeless. It can't be threatened. It can't be hurt. It's eternal. That has value, and that belongs to you. You do have eternal life, but we don't value it. We value the things of time. So when he says a miracle is everyone's right, but purification is necessary first, we're asked to let go of those impure thoughts that we have where we're putting value in things that have no value at all. So as I begin to withdraw my investment, and that's what we have an investment in things. We have an attachment to things. To recognize that life is something that you can really go deeper into life, but not to get attached to things in life. It's okay to, I use the word, to marinate. When you're cooking and the juices are marinating, it's always better the next day. At least I find that food that marinates overnight, it gets all the juices together and it's all joined, and it just tastes better because everything becomes one. So you can marinate on what life is as love gives you unconditional life. When I say love, love is another word for God. When I use the word, I am not a body, I am free, I am still as God created me. He uses that lesson 23 times in the Course. That's 7% of the Course is that one lesson. I am still as God created me. Over the years, I've recognized that I use the word love. Love and God, for me, is synonymous. Peace, love, truth, God, they are all the same. In the English language, we have different words. They're all the same. It's the oneness. Love is unconditional. There's no conditions. There's no judgments. There's no division. It sees all the same. It's that sameness, that equality, that is what we are, the equality. Now, the ego mind doesn't know anything about equality, nothing. It only sees differences. It's blindsided to seeing sameness. It doesn't know what sameness is. It has eyes that only see differences. I mean, the only way that I can see anything is I see forms. And each form is different than the other form. Each form has a name tag on it. And we're able to differentiate one from the other based on looks, on personality, religion, nationality, language, millions of things. That's how the ego sees things. It quantifies. There's an order of difficulty. IQ is very important to who's smarter than who. Who has more than what? Who has the biggest bank account? Who? Everything is in numbers. Spirit doesn't see numbers at all. It only sees one. Only sees one. It's never confused by complexity. And there's a line in the Course that says, simplicity is of God. Complexity is of the ego. So whenever you're trying to figure anything out, trying to plan, trying to understand, well, I don't understand this, I'm trying to understand this, you can be sure the ego is at work. Ego is controlling what you're trying to understand. Remember, the goal of this Course is not understanding. In fact, in chapter 18, section 4, it's called a little willingness. He actually says, your understanding is not necessary. Only your willingness is necessary. Only your willingness is necessary. And the word willingness comes from the word will. The will of God. In the belief in time, the belief that time could come to circumvent eternity, and now I live in time instead of in eternity, it seems that I am separate from God, and therefore, well, I don't really know God's will. I know what my will is. I hope that they're the same will. Sometimes they're not, and I understand why they're not, because after all, I grew up in a certain religion, my family taught me a certain way, so the things that I value are maybe not the same thing God values, but hopefully we can get along. But the Course doesn't say that. It says God's will and your will is the same will, one will. In fact, the Holy Spirit gave me something very easy to get into this oneness. I was thinking yesterday, well, I'm going to be doing this thing at the CRS Center on Sunday afternoon, and I want to say something, that is profound, that maybe someone can appreciate what I say, and they say, well, gee whiz, Dove had something nice to say, and I learned something, so my mind is working on it, and and I hear Spirit speak to me. He says, no, simplicity is of God. And the only thing you need to do, he gave me a pointer, which I'm going to share with you. He says, instead of thinking of things, just think of when you have a birthday cake and there's only one candle on that birthday cake, only one candle. It's your birthday, there's only one candle, there's not many candles, only one candle, and the only thing that you need to do is to blow out that one candle. That's all you need to do. You focus your mind on blowing out that one candle, and all your wishes come true. Just simplify your mind. Let all those thoughts go. Focus on that one candle. The hush of heaven holds my heart now. That's how easy it is to remember the simplicity of God. There's nothing that has to be remembered, nothing you have to understand. I spent most of my life thinking that I had to understand things in order to, well, when I finally understand what everything is for, I'll make the right decisions, the right judgments, and I'll be happy. Well, here I'm going into my 80th year next May, and I can tell you that yesterday it came to me, you don't have to know anything to be happy. Happy is our natural state. When it says in Lesson 101, he says, God's will for you is perfect happiness. God's will for me is perfect happiness. God's will for me is perfect happiness. Does anyone know what Lesson 102 is?
Happiness is a decision?
Well, God's will and my will is the same will. God's will for me is perfect happiness. Lesson 102. I share God's will for my perfect happiness. God's will and my will, I share the same will for my perfect happiness. Now, in the ego mind, the ego doesn't know anything about reason. Reason being only of spirit. Spirit says if we are one, reason is that we share the same will. Ego doesn't see oneness, it only sees two-ness, duality. You or me, us or them. Something outside of me is doing something to me. And I have to defend myself or I'm going to be hurt. Well, if I live in fear, it must be because I don't trust. At Lesson 47, again, God, or one, is the strength in which I trust. I trust in our oneness. Can you think of any benefits if we were all joined as one? Is there any benefits you can think of at all?
No war.
What?
No war.
No war. Very good. The funny thing in the Course of Miracles, he always does lessons in 2s and 3s. So lesson 47 and 48 to me always went together. 47 is, if I'm trusting in oneness, in equality, which is peace, what is 48? There's nothing to fear. Lesson 48 is the shortest lesson in the entire Course. He says, there's nothing to fear. This is a fact. He says, the next line is, this is a fact. He only uses the word fact 2 or 3 times in the entire course. God is. This is a fact. There's nothing to fear. This is a fact. And then he gives you a disclaimer. He said, well, it's not a fact for those people who are still invested in illusions. And what's an illusion? It's one of those thoughts that are in my mind that I believe to be true. And as Dove says, every belief has a lie right in the center of it. If you spell the word belief, there's a lie, L-I-E, right in the center of belief. So how do we get to a place where we can simply let go and trust? It seems that there's always something that's getting in our way. By the way, the back of my card, and my card is up here for those people who want to see. I have 2 cards. This is one of them. But the card says, and this comes out of the Course in Miracles, chapter 26, section 8, paragraph 2. It says, trust would settle every problem now. Trust would settle every problem now. Really? That goes along with lesson 80. Does anyone know lesson 80? All my problems are solved. Remember 79 and 80 says, 79 says, let me recognize my problems so they can be solved. And lesson 80 says, I have no problems. They have been solved. How can you do that? Well, if we identify with the body, this body, you do have problems. There's no 2 ways about it. The ego has nothing but problems for you to fix. Once you fix a problem, it always has 2 more problems. That's what problems do. They always breed more problems. As soon as you fix one, there's always more. Does anyone have a to-do list that you finish a whole to-do list? There's always more to do. Because you're listening to the voice that says there's more to do. You haven't done enough. You're not good enough. You can do better. You can do more. Does anyone know what the Course in Miracles says about the word more? Well, there's one section of the Course called the Antichrist. And I want you to know I avoided reading this section for many years. Because I didn't want to read about the Antichrist. I figured, what do I need to read about the Antichrist for? But one day I had to read it because I was called for jury duty, and I had to sit there, and I brought my Course in Miracles book because I know I would be sitting there all morning until they called me. And that day, the reading from the textbook happened to be chapter 29, section 8. So I read the Antichrist, and it's 2.5 pages long. And what did I discover? He starts off by saying, do you think you know what an idol is? That's how he starts the Antichrist. Do you think you know what an idol is? So my mind says, of course I know. Like money is an idol, sex, drugs, rock and roll, worshiping the sun, the moon, the stars. That's all idols. He says, no, you don't know what an idol is because you don't know what the purpose of an idol is, because the purpose of an idol is to be obscure. Because if you knew the purpose of an idol, you wouldn't worship it anymore. I mean, as soon as you knew that it was some stupid thing that you're worshiping, why would you worship it? So the purpose of an idol is to be obscure. You don't even know you're worshiping it when you're worshiping it. 2.5 pages later, he tells you what the idol is, what the Antichrist is, that you worship and you don't even know you're worshiping it when you're worshiping it. It's more. I need more. I want to do better. I don't have enough. I mean, who would ever believe that that's something that we worship? We all want more. If you have 1,000,000, you want 1,000,000,000. If you have 1,000,000,000, you want more billions. You always want more. What you have is never enough. Now, obviously, if you're the Son of God and you think you need more, you're not the Son of God. It's really that simple. You're either the Son of God or you're not. Jesus was a man who saw the face of Christ in all that he met, and he remembered God because he saw the same. He didn't see some was better. They were one religion, some of a different religion, different country, different language, different this, the rich, the poor. He didn't see differences. He saw the sameness, the quality, the light, the love, the peace of God in all that he met. Of course, he brought the peace of God with him. When he was 13 years old, he said, let me go about my Father's business. I and my Father are one. So he saw this oneness, this sameness, this quality, and he went out to teach it. I'm going to ask it this, because I have a way of just talking, and I'm going to ask, are there any questions on any of this at all? Because I've said a lot, so I invite you to start coming back with some of the thoughts or questions that you have. Please, go ahead.
That oneness is very fascinating to me. But if I want to look at oneness or want oneness, then there is still a dichotomy. I mean, to be really, really one, you have to drop it as an object of what I want and just be. So one thing that became very clear to me, and I don't even know if my Catholic Church would exactly explain it that way, but I could never understand why Jesus' last words on the cross were, "My Father, why didst thou forsake me?" That was, and so on my own, I tried to go deeper into it. And how I found it, thought it, is that at that moment, he had so much pain in his body on the cross that he did separate himself somehow. And he talked about the Father as other than he, the Son. There was that dichotomy. But then what I found so beautiful is, then he gave up his body and he became one with the Father, because he didn't identify anymore with this enormous pain he felt in the body. So that to me is one way of trying to understand oneness, because every time we talk about it, it is objectively thinking, and it isn't really the living that oneness that I am. So that's what I'm dealing
Very
with.
good.
But for
Okay.
me,
I think the way that you look at it is perfect. There are other people who have other ways of looking at that same quote, Father, why hast thou forsaken me?
Sure, yeah.
One of the most interesting that I've heard, which I choose to think of it, in those days, just like today, if you're doing the Course in Miracles, somebody will just give you the title of the lesson, like God is the strength in which I trust, or there's nothing to fear, or I am sustained by the love of God. That's all you do. You just say the title, and everyone who knows what you're talking about will then go and read it. There happens to be in David's book of Psalms, there's a psalm which starts out, Father, why hast thou forsaken me? And what he was doing is he was saying to his followers, I want you to know that in that psalm, David starts with, why hast thou forsaken me? But he doesn't end with, he knows the Father has never forsaken him. That the I and the Father are one.
They are one?
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Then why even make the distinction between Son and Father?
Well, there isn't that, okay. In the English language, you do have to make distinctions so people do understand you, but there is no difference between the Father and the Son. It's really cause and effect. Cause, there's creator and the created. There's no difference. The Father just extends himself, gives all of himself to all equally. Love can only give equally. It can't give, oh, I'm going to make you special today and give you a little bit more than. The reason there's no peace in the world, does anyone know why there's no peace in the world? And there never will be any peace in the world. Remember, the world is not real. He tells you that in lesson 189, paragraph 7. There is no world. Forget this world. Forget this course. He says that in lesson 189. Forget this world. Forget this. He tells you to forget 1,300 pages he just gave you. He says, forget it. You can't bring this book home with you. You can't bring, this is a book of concepts, symbols, words. You can't bring concepts home. The ego loves concepts. Oh, I don't understand this concept. Well, if you don't understand the concept here, go to the next page. It'll tell you the same thing over in slightly different words. You will understand it. But the ego only wants to understand so it can know something, so it can finally be happy. No, our happiness is our nature. Joy is our nature. Does that help you with that?
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I'm
Okay,
very much into
yeah.
that. For me, it's easier probably to understand with like non-duality or even quantum physics, that everything is really just energy.
Yes.
And then you need an observer to collapse it, and then you have something, and that is, I guess, our mental mind there, to hold on to and localize it, but otherwise it's so. So I'm seeing it with maybe different terminology than, and I read it many, many years ago, so I can't even define it, what exactly doesn't quite resonate with me, but I'm sure
Okay.
it's just the way we try to understand words, rather than living them.
And words, as the Course says, are twice removed from the life and the reality of God's love. Because you can't express love in words at all. Love is an energy. You know, it's something that connects all as one. Which reminds me of something that was given to me by the Holy Spirit to share here. It was given to me last week, usually on my way to doing a conference or a meeting. And last week I was on my way to being here, and it came to me. And I was sitting in a synagogue. Most of you know, they had the High Holy Days, and there was Rosh Hashanah, the New Year, and then there was Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. And I happened to hear a woman rabbi in New York City on TV. We're watching, and she said, in Genesis it says God says this is good, this is good, this is good, everything is good, and then it finally came to one thing, and he says this is not good. Now, I didn't remember this in Genesis at all, so I said to my wife, what is it that she said is not good? And my wife said, loneliness is not good. So Adam was in the garden alone. What wasn't good? You know, he was alone. So we have Eve, and he wasn't alone anymore. You know? So it came to me that the word loneliness is the same word. It's a synonym for separation. And we all know that the only mistake that has to be corrected is the belief in separation. There's nothing else. That you're separate from God. I'm alone in the garden. I've done the wrong thing. I picked the wrong fruit. I got to blame somebody. The serpent said I didn't do it. You know. I get kicked out of the garden, get evicted. You know, I'm abandoned. I live a life in my head alone. I'm alone. I got to plan on how to earn, get money, get food, stay alive, survive. That's the whole purpose of the ego thought system, is to survive, to stay alive, to have more, so I don't have less. Meanwhile, the Holy Spirit's purpose is for the healing of the mind of God's Son. That's the only purpose that we have. Yes, go ahead, Lynn.
Hi, you had mentioned the world will never be a good place, but then there's a happy dream.
But it's a dream.
Yeah, but it's the world.
Yeah. Okay. I'm not saying that you're not going to have peace in your life. I didn't say that. I said the world will always be at war.
Yeah.
And there's only one reason why the world is going to be at war. Does anyone know the reason? I'm glad you brought it up because I kind of dropped it out. Because this is a world of inequality. There's no equality in this world.
But the Course says when we realize, then we get into the happy dream. And then we pass it on. We all connect that way.
Yes. I am not saying that you can't have a happy dream. Right. But the world is a battleground. If you read chapter 23, I have a fellow teacher, her name is Veronica Gabrielle. She says if there's one chapter in the whole 31 chapters of A Course in Miracles you want to read, there's only one, make it chapter 23. And chapter 23 is called The War I Wage Against Myself. That's the name of the chapter, The War I Wage Against Myself. So even though I say, Dove says, the world is never going to be at peace because there's no equality, that's really going on in my mind. It's going on in Dove's mind, that there's no equality. If you read chapter 25 of A Course in Miracles, it's all about heaven. It's about justice. And justice requires one condition: equality. There's no peace without equality. Peace is the key to the kingdom. The kingdom is you. The peace is the key to knowing yourself. But you cannot know yourself without that one condition of equality. The opposite of equality is inequality, where I get to choose one over the other. That's called, in Course language, that's called sacrifice. And he tells you in lesson 187, paragraph 6, he says, sacrifice is the one idea behind all of the world's pain and suffering, lack, scarcity, poverty, starvation, and even death. Lesson 187, paragraph 6. The name of that lesson is, I bless the world because I bless myself. But if we deny the blessing to anyone, to even one brother, we're denying it to ourselves. Because either all are included equally, or there is no peace. If you leave anyone out, if you leave the terrorists out of your equality, you cannot know yourself. For those people who follow John Mundy had one of his favorite lessons is the terrorist within us. I don't know if you know that lesson. If you do read Miracles magazine, the terrorist within us. Oh, we like to blame the terrorist outside of us. Of course. If it wasn't for them, we'd have peace. Isn't that obvious? Didn't we fight World War I to make the world safe for democracy? And then we had World War II. That definitely was the end, right? And then when the Iron Curtain came down, I remember going up First Avenue in a bus just after the Iron Curtain came down and the old Communist Party had dissolved. And the bus stopped in front of the United Nations building. This woman got on. She happened to sit right next to me. And I think it was 1989, 1990, something like that. I said, I guess you don't have too much to do. There's no more Cold War. There's no more friction. She said, would you believe there are 67 wars going on right now on the planet? 60. Yeah, we don't know what's going on in Africa, the tribes, and there's always something going on. But why is there something always going on? Because we always choose one over the other. That's called sacrifice, choosing one over the other. Sacrifice is inequality. I hope that answers your thing.
The original sin, right?
What?
The original sin.
What is the original sin?
Well, in order to to know it. So once you define something to have a hold on it, then there is another side, because define to me means limited.
Yes, okay.
So there is the other side, and that to me that is good and evil, I think,
Right.
in a big way.
And I know that you're very familiar with non-duality and duality, so as soon as you choose another side, there is a conflict.
Exactly.
In peace, there's nothing that opposes the peace of God. There is no conflict in the mind of God. There's a lot of conflict in our mind. We have our right-mindedness and our wrong-mindedness. It was Rumi 800 years ago, and he didn't have the benefit of A Course in Miracles. He says, beyond this world of wrong-mindedness and right-mindedness, do it my way is right and do it your way is wrong, there's a field, and I'll meet you there. He said that 800 years ago, and he didn't know that the word field would now be used by quantum physicists, that there's a field. Everything is included in this field. I'm always speaking about myself. I am always, as Dove says, you can write that on my tombstone. I am always speaking about myself. There's nothing outside of me. He tells you this in chapter 18, section 6. He says, the very first line, it says, there's nothing outside of you. This is what you must ultimately learn. There's nothing out there other than what I put out there. Projection makes perception. The world you see is an outside picture of your own inner condition. My inner condition is divided, split. I'm always choosing between one or the other. I'm trying to always be right. That's why I have to understand things in order to be happy. If I don't understand things, how can I make the right choice? But you don't have to make any choices. What you are is choiceless, eternal, changeless. What God creates doesn't change. It's eternal. Go ahead.
I see there's a lot of people waking up.
Yeah.
But there's also a lot of people very other up, messed up. And it seems to be a tug of war. Like I know the Course goes, it's in different depths. And how does a happy dream, okay, there's a tug of war where one is love and one is not. And does the Course say anything about how the happy dream comes? Like, I know I try to pass love to everyone, and I get that love back. But it's so split up, and then I don't understand,
Okay. I think the easiest way to get to the happy dream for me, and I'm not saying that I'm reading this from the Course, I'm doing it for me, is to know that you're dreaming. That's what makes it a happy dream. You see, as Ken Wapnick used to always remind us, it was never the tiny mad idea that entered into eternity that caused all the ruckus, that caused the problems. It was the tiny mad idea that entered into eternity. It was the fact that the Son of God took it seriously. He remembered not to laugh. He wanted to be more, better, different. More, better, different than what? Than his brother? Than his father? His brother and his father are the same, by the way. There's no difference, as was pointed out. Father, brother, uncle, aunt, child, they're all the same. We're all included as one. Which brings me to lesson 190, which is what Holy Spirit gave me a week ago to bring to this room, to this session that we're having. Lesson 190 simply says, original is, I choose the joy of God instead of the pain. Some of you probably remember that. And since it's one of the last 20 lessons in part 1 of the workbook, part 1 of the workbook is the first 200 lessons, and he says in review 6, which is review that follows lesson 200, any one of these last 20 lessons is the entire course. He tells you that. So lesson 190 is the entire course. So is lesson 186, 188, 189. But let's take a look at 190 because that's the one that was given to me to share with you. I choose the joy of God instead of the pain. instead of the pain of what? Of loneliness. Yeah, I saw back then a week ago or 2 weeks ago when I heard God said, this is not good. It's to be alone, to be separate, alone in the garden. I choose the joy of our oneness. The funny thing is when Jesus was alive, the holiest prayer then in the Jewish religion, he was Jewish, the holiest prayer is still the holiest prayer today. Many people have died rather than not say this prayer. Many, hundreds have died rather than not say this prayer. It goes like this. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Now the word Echad means one. People of the world, our Creator is one. That's exactly what it says. When he said, I and the Father are one, he was doing the Shema Yisrael, and I am the Father of one. Oneness includes all equally. Notice he says, the joy of oneness. I choose the joy of oneness instead of the pain of separation and loneliness. Let's look at that. Why do we have pain? Why do we have suffering? And when we come back after our break, we're going to take a break shortly, we're going to go into the reasons why we have pain and suffering. And we don't know the joy. Even though we're doing a course that has all to do with joy, and there's a line in the course that says, yes, you've been teaching this, but do you really have the joy and the happiness that this course teaches? He says that. Do you really have the joy and the happiness that this course, you talk about it a lot, but do you have it? So what is it that keeps us from this joy of this oneness? He tells you in 2 places in the course why you don't have joy. One of them is in that same lesson, 190, in paragraph 8, and the other is in the Manual for Teachers on page 17. Let's take the first one first, lesson 190. In paragraph 8, he says, you chose pain instead of joy. You paid a really handsome ransom to choose this pain instead of the joy. But the ego says, what are you, crazy? I would never do that. Who would choose pain? I would never do that to myself. Then he tells you exactly why you did it. You didn't want your father to have the joy of his son. You denied the father the joy of his creation. You denied the father the joy of his own creation. I'd rather say, who's sorry now? Yeah, instead of, who's happy now? My natural state is happiness and joy. But I'm choosing the pain because I don't want my father to think that he did well. He didn't do well by me. He did very poorly by me. I mean, look at me. I don't have what other people have. They have and I don't have. I have to work and stress and earn and learn and get. And then I'm going to die? What kind of a life is that he gave me? In the teacher's manual, it says the exact same thing in slightly different words. On page 17 of the Manual for Teachers, it says, how is healing accomplished? Remember, the purpose of A Course in Miracles is healing. It says, how is healing accomplished? And it gives you, on page 17, 18, and 19, he gives you the ABC of healing. But at the top of page 17, before you even get into the A, he gives you what I call his famous disclaimer. I think it's funny because he writes 1,300 pages on healing, and then he says, unless you want to know why you want to be sick, and the word sick is not the sickness of the body. The word sick is the sickness of the mind or a weak mind, why you want to be powerless, why you want to be less than, a victim. unfairly treated. Unless you want to know why you want to be sick, you cannot be healed. Because that's the cause of all your pain and suffering, is you're doing this to yourself. But why would you do this to yourself? The ego says, I would never do this to myself. Somebody's doing it to me. They're doing it to me. If it wasn't for them, I would be okay. If it wasn't for the guy in the Oval Office, I would be okay. No. If you read page 17, the perceived purpose of sickness, he says, you want to do this because you don't want your father to punish you for what you did. You'll do your own punishing. You'll punish yourself. I mean, after all, if he punishes you, you could be sent into oblivion. So I'll have a sad, sorry life, full of problems, and say, hey, Father, other people are guilty. Punish them. Leave me alone, please. That's the perceived purpose of sickness. I'll do it myself. You don't have to look at me. Look at them. They're guilty. Every time you point a finger that way, there's 3 fingers pointing back. I'm always speaking about myself. I'm looking at the time. I'm saying this is a good time maybe to take a break. When we come back, I'm going to do exactly what we said. In fact, we're going to take personal cases, which I don't always do, but we are a small enough group. If you want to talk about something in your life that bothers you, that disturbs you, that takes away your peace, that stresses you out, gets you upset, angry, bring it back. And we're going to talk about it. Because once you recognize that you're doing this to yourself, you have a choice. And whenever you do anything to yourself, it always came from a belief that you're right and someone else was wrong. You made a judgment. Well, I'm not like them, I'm like me. That's separation. I'm not like them, I'm like me. That person is rude. I can never be rude, I'm so polite. Separation. That's how we separate ourselves. But who am I separating myself from? My brother, who is me. You gotta laugh. If you're laughing, you are getting it. If you're not laughing, you still think there's something here to understand. There's nothing to understand. We're always speaking about ourselves. Come back and we'll talk more about it. Thank you.